Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Cracking the Cocoon, brought to you by Embrace Your Passion with Mentoring Metamorphosis. I am super excited because this week is our very first episode, including Dear Butterfly. So for those of you who missed last week's episode, or this is your first time listening, the idea behind Dear Butterfly is to do sort of Dear Abby style questions. Have you, our audience, send in questions that you would like to have some perspective, some advice on. The question that we're using today is something that was submitted prior to our show starting, and I have been looking forward to providing some feedback, some perspective, and hopefully some helpful advice on this topic. So let's go ahead and jump in. The question, signed A Concerned Sister, starts, Dear Butterfly, my sister has depression, and I am trying my best to be supportive and understanding, but I have a really hard time doing this when she lies to me. I know she's lying because she'll tell me something completely different than she tells my other 3 sisters and even my parents. The worst is when she lies to my kids. How can I show her understanding and love while still standing up for myself, my family, and my values? Once again, absolutely fantastic question. Thank you so much for sending it in, because I think this is a topic that comes up quite often, honestly, in my office with people who are dealing with other family members who are dealing with things like this, and it can be very hard. It can be very hard to be dealing with something like depression or anxiety yourself, and it can be equally hard to be there supporting and loving and trying to understand and care for someone who is struggling with these things as well. So let's get started. Generally, in a session when we would be able to talk back and forth, we would cover different things here, and I'd get some more information from you on the specifics. We would look at what specific things is she lying to you about, because obviously there's different levels of lies. Is she embellishing things? Is she giving you something completely different from what she's telling your mom, your dad, your sisters? Or is she telling you, I don't know. Without knowing that, I will give a few different examples of why she may be lying. And basically the format of what I'm going to try and do here today is we'll start out by looking at her behavior, and then I will get into kind of some suggestions of things that you might be able to do to help make things easier or more comfortable for yourself. So in terms of what she's lying about, what I would be looking for there is trying to help determine how you know she's lying. Obviously, she's telling you something different than she's telling your sisters or your parents, but how different would be key. And trying to figure out if she's lying to you, or if she's lying to them, or if she's lying to everyone, because in situations like this, especially with depression, it's quite common for people to live in a constant state of lying to themselves. Sometimes they feel like they're lying to themselves all day by trying to tell themselves that they're okay when they really don't feel okay. Sometimes they need to lie to themselves just to get out of bed in the morning. Tell themselves that it's going to be a different kind of day, tell themselves that something certain is going to happen, that they feel differently about themselves or their situation than they really do inside. So it's important to understand that more than likely, and obviously I don't know your sister and I can't guarantee any of this, but more than likely the lying is not malicious. It's not something that she's doing to be hurtful. Someone who's struggling with depression is living in kind of a constant state of hurt and is, again, having lies fed to them all day long in their own brain about the state of life. They're quite honestly living in a very different reality than you or your sisters or your parents. So inconsistencies between what she tells you and them and whatnot can be because it's a different day, can be because it's a different time of day, and can be simply because she's in a very different place in her mind at that moment. Or, of course, if she is blatantly lying and saying to you that she got a certain job and then telling everyone else that no, she didn't actually, or telling you that, yeah, everything's okay with this and I have plenty of money, but then telling everyone else that she's broke, that's a little bit more in depth, that's a little bit more blatant. So again, the other thing I would be looking for is kind of trying to understand what her relationship is with you versus with the others. Would you say that you feel like she's closer to you than she is to your other sisters or your parents? Or would you say that she's closer to one of your other sisters and you guys don't have as tight of a relationship? And the reason I would look into that is because depending on how much she relies on you for support, depending on how much she looks up to you, maybe even envies your life. That's something that's common between siblings in general, but especially when someone's in the throes of depression, there's a lot of upward comparison, a lot of, I wish I could just be like so-and-so, and why don't I have the things that so-and-so has, and I'm not in a great place because I don't have these things, or I'm not like that person. So depending on your relationship, as we dug into that, we might be able to determine if she's telling you more truths and the inconsistencies are actually that she's lying and putting on a different story for everyone else. Obviously, you know the details. So this is really fun to throw all of this out there, but in doing it this way, hopefully it's helpful to everyone in every different situation to look at and examine these things, because lies in general tend to come from a place of truth, and it's very common in especially someone dealing with depression or someone dealing with anxiety. Usually those two come hand in hand in a lot of ways. To want to not lean too hard on the people around them, to be very concerned that they are going to be a burden or that they are troubling someone. So hiding things is not at all uncommon. And it's usually, in their mind, an attempt to kind of protect themselves, but also to protect the people around them that they love from realizing just how depressed they are, or just how deeply they're feeling these pains or confusions or stresses. And in other instances, there can be that one person sometimes that they're willing to open up to, they're willing to share things with. And it can be intensely uncomfortable and intensely painful to share even the slightest steps in the direction of something so vulnerable as how honestly they're feeling or what honestly they're dealing with, that they may dip towards it with you or one of your sisters or your parents, and then kind of roll back on it and find themselves exaggerating things or find themselves saying things that they know even while they're saying it aren't quite true, but they're trying to backtrack to a place where they feel a little bit more comfortable. So there are a lot of different reasons that she may be saying things that are not entirely true to you or to your family members. And I would also be really curious how you know or how you find out about these inconsistencies that are being called lies. Is it something that just sort of accidentally comes up? Your mom or your sister says, "Oh, I was so happy to hear that she's doing great with this," or that this is going on. And you think to yourself, well, that's not at all what she told me. Or are you out actively asking them and comparing? And I imagine that it would depend on how long this has been going on. A lot of times once people determine that things aren't always honest, they have a tendency to go and want to quote-unquote fact check with other people. But I would be curious to know what those kinds of conversations with your sisters and your parents are. If you guys are all commonly calling each other quickly after meeting with her or seeing her or talking with her and wanting to compare notes, or if it's a lot more relaxed and just sort of every so often something comes up. Because, again, someone in a state of depression and or anxiety has a tendency to be super heightened in awareness. And if she has noticed at any point that one of you knows something that she told the other one in confidence or just in a different place in her day or her life, then she could also be very aware that you guys are all comparing notes. And who knows how she feels about that. I've known some people who prefer it, and it's like, that's fine, I just tell one person, then I let them spread it to everybody else, and whatever, forget it. Then it's I don't have to try and explain this to everybody. It's a complicated thing, and it's uncomfortable, and so I only had to tell one person. But for other people, it can be very extremely uncomfortable, again, that it's their life being talked about behind their back. That, again, when you don't necessarily feel very, very secure in your own life and in your own feelings, because everything's so fluid, it can be all the more frightening and all the more upsetting to think about other people discussing your life and the details that you share with them without you there. Because if you don't even know how to put it, so to speak, other people have a tendency to just restate things, to paraphrase things, and you get a little bit of the good old telephone game with I love thinking about in the Simpsons, I think it was, where one person says something and then it goes through another person, and by the end it becomes Purple Monkey Dishwasher, right? And that's nobody's fault. It's just you don't always remember exactly what someone said, or they didn't always say it the way that they meant to say it. And so if she's at all aware, which my guess would be that she is, that you guys all know she's telling you different things, maybe are comparing things, that can also be coloring how and why she tells you things differently. Another thing, which would be a very sensitive one for us to get into and discuss, would be whether or not she feels like she can be honest with you. How, again, this goes back to how close you guys are, what kind of relationship you two have, and kind of how you respond to the things that she tells you. If it's something where, you find yourself in a very empathetic position, you feel like she's able to open up to you, and then later you find out that she told other people something different, and that's hurtful because you feel like you're in this position of, as you've said here, you're trying your best to be supportive and understanding, and you want to be there for her, understand her, love her. Perhaps you guys are closer than you think. Perhaps that's actually a barrier again for her. If you mean that much to her, it could be all the harder for her to bring herself to relate with you, because she could be afraid of losing that support system. And she could be trying to make you proud, and if she feels like something she did wasn't good enough, she might lie to you, because it might mean more to her in that moment to hear you be proud of her for something, even though she knows that it's not real, than it would mean to her to tell you the truth and have you commiserate with her and whatnot. So again, just kind of looking at different reasons, different things, different behaviors. Nothing I ever say here is meant to excuse your feelings or her feelings or anything, but in the effort of finding perspective, thinking about all the different reasons and ways that things can be, it can really open up our eyes to, oh, okay, well, now that I realize this, that makes more sense, and it can help us cope and process these different feelings. But to get on to the biggie, the huge piece of your question, and really I think the essential part of your question, of how can you show her understanding and love while still standing up for yourself, your family, and your values. Wow. The phrasing that you have there specifically, to me, really denotes that this has been a deeply emotional and struggle for you as well, which again is not at all uncommon for people who are very close with others who are struggling with depression or anxiety. just the emotion in the sentence you have there about the worst is when she lies to your kids. That's something else that I would be really curious to understand, what kinds of lies she's telling your kids. Obviously, I don't know if the things that your sister's challenged by or struggling with right now extend beyond depression. It is usually kind of something that can run alongside some other challenges. If she's lying to them about saying that she's going to be at something or she's going to do something with them, and then she doesn't follow through, I can imagine that absolutely is an emotionally wrecking thing for kids to go through, because kids are so sweet and they absolutely believe everything a lot of times that the people that they're close to tell them, and it just rocks their world to have someone not follow through on something. So if it's those kinds of things, I can imagine how that would be absolutely the worst thing to see. And again, it's kind of a place of, with what she's struggling through, when she tells them that she would be somewhere or she would do something with them, odds are she 100% believes that it means it in that moment. And it's the time between that moment and when it would actually come to pass that she could be having a depressive episode that day. Something else could have happened that's just thrown her for a total loop. And she's just in a totally different place and she just really feels like she can't. More often than not, again, people are not attempting to be malicious in this kind of situation. Usually it's a lot easier to just ignore people than to make promises and not follow through on them. But if she's lying to them about other things, it would really depend on what kinds of things she's lying to them about. So how to stand up for yourself, your family, and your values. The fact that you use the words standing up for yourself, to me, says that something in the situation between you and her is feeling like it's encroaching on your own emotional health, your own personal life in a way that you're not comfortable with. So obviously, from what else you've said here, that would be the case. And first suggestion there is always looking at how to create healthy boundaries. Sometimes this will require a respectful confrontation, preferably conversation, but it can feel slightly confrontational in just having to bring these topics up with her. I don't see anything here mentioned as to whether or not you've addressed with her directly that, hey, I've noticed that sometimes what you tell me doesn't seem to be what you're telling everyone else. Again, going back to how you know about these things, if you guys have all been trying to hide from her that you're comparing notes and you know different things, this is going to be a bigger deal to open up this can of worms with her, that you guys are aware that she's telling different stories. If you know that she knows, or if it's sort of been kind of flippantly thrown out before of like, hey, I thought you told me that this happened, but then I heard from so-and-so that whatever else happened, it won't be as big of a deal to tread down this lane and kind of start this conversation with her. But I usually recommend starting somewhere like that. If you can, if you guys are in a place where she's leaning on you or talking to you about these things, pick a good time, find a good place, acknowledge that, you know, you want to try and understand and find a good day to reach out to her. Don't do it in the middle of a big family event. Don't just do it randomly in the middle of an afternoon when you guys are trying to run errands. Try and find a good time to sit down quietly together and actually have a heart-to-heart about. So I've noticed that sometimes you tell me one thing and you'll tell sister so-and-so something else, or, you know, you'll tell mom something else, and I want to understand why. And then the key thing there is when you ask a question like that, you'll notice I used a lot of I language. Huge fan of I language versus you language. You language can make people feel very attacked it can immediately set them off to feel very defensive, and it can also immediately shut down any hopes of having an open, honest conversation. So I language has a way of opening doors, opening conversations. And so if you can share just the slightest bit, I've noticed these things. I want to understand why. That can really open it up and let her sit with it for a moment. And the key thing here, after you ask a question, is to just stop everything and listen. Let her sit there in silence for 10 or 30 or 60 seconds if need be to come around to what she wants to say. Odds are she'll probably start talking before she's done thinking. So give her time to start to actually enunciate what she's really trying to say. And just listen. Just completely listen. Don't think about what you want to say next. Don't think about what you want to ask next. Just listen and let her try and explain. And as she explains, if she starts saying, well, I think this, and well, I think that, and well, I think that, and the other, or whatever, and then she calms down, or it starts to come around to a place, then you can think of, okay, well, I could see that, or I don't understand this part, so what's the deal with X? Or I want you to know that you can be honest with me because blank. Or I feel really frustrated when I hear that you didn't tell me the truth. Whatever your feelings are there, you can share them with her and kind of discuss this back and forth. And through doing that, hopefully you guys can get a better understanding. You can get a better solid foundation there, and let her know that, you know, she can trust you to tell you the truth. Or you may find out that she has been trusting you more than anyone else. And you can talk to her about whether or not she might feel comfortable being more honest with other people, or whether she might prefer that you not share the things that she's been sharing with you, so that other people know that she's not telling them the whole truth. So there's a lot that you guys can unpack there if you can have this heart-to-heart. If for some reason you can't, or if for some reason she's not open to it when it happens, and it kind of gets shut down quickly, and you guys have to move forward in a non-worked out way, because that is very common as well in life, that we don't always get to sit down and have these conversations and have things clear up for ourselves. Working on healthy boundaries. You know, if the worst is when she lies to your kids, then think about ways to prevent that. How much time does she spend with your kids currently? What kinds of things, again, she's lying to them about. If it's making promises that she doesn't keep, then I would say it would be a twofold thing. Again, very respectfully, very calmly, just explain to her at a good point, or in an email if you can do it that way, if she responds better to that, so she has time to sit with it. Whatever the best way to be able to approach it with her, of just, I would really appreciate it if you stopped telling the kids that you were going to do X with them, or you stopped doing this, or you stopped doing that. Naturally, I would suggest that you start with something like, I want you to know that I understand that you can't always follow through on these things. That I understand that you are going through a lot, and maybe even that you don't hold any particular grudge against her, if you don't, that she's not always in a place to be able to accomplish these things. That being said, your children are younger and they don't understand what she's going through. And it's probably for the best that they don't completely understand the state that she's dealing with, her depression and whatnot, but that it clearly affects them because they don't understand why she wouldn't be able to follow through on something, or they don't understand why she would tell them something that they later find out not to be true. And that it's important to you because of how you're raising your children, that honesty be a big part of things, and that you would appreciate it. Again, these are all very important language things to keep it as calm and as respectful and as flowing in a positive direction as possible. That you would appreciate it if she didn't oversell something, if she didn't exaggerate something, if she didn't make a promise that she won't be able to follow through. And you can even offer her that, it's great that you want to take them to go do such and such. Maybe instead of saying, okay, you know what, next Sunday I'll take you to such and such, and then not necessarily being able to follow through, say, how about we go to such and such sometime? Maybe we can find a time to do that one of these days. Maybe, whatever else. And at least give that wiggle room so that the kids don't have a definitive promise. Kids will be kids. Maybes are still, oh my God, Auntie said we're going to go do X. So it might not be a huge improvement, but that's the other side of it, is that you can really, I don't know how old your children are, but you can address this with them as well. You can talk to them about, it's a great opportunity, actually, especially if they're a little bit older than, 5, 6, 10, especially in that range. It's a great opportunity to start having a discussion about feelings and emotions and all of the things, and kind of help them understand that, well, so what do you do when you feel sad? Sometimes Auntie, whatever her name is, feels really, really, really sad, and she can't control it. It just sort of happens, and she doesn't know when it's going to happen. And so sometimes she's really, really looking forward to doing blank with you guys. But she wakes up that day, and for no reason at all, she's feeling really, really sad. And she doesn't want to make you guys sad. So she isn't able to make it that day because she wants it to be a fun thing. So let's try and have patience with Auntie Blank, and know that she really wants to do these things, and she really loves you guys, and she'll get around to it eventually. So let's just have patience with her, and it gives us something to look forward to even longer, right? Kind of help start teaching them at an age-appropriate level about what she's going through. This will help not only them deal with her, but it'll also help them start to understand and be able to empathize with, as they grow up, knowing what their other friends are going to be like, knowing what other people they come into contact with that suffer from depression are dealing with. And it'll also start to give them words and understanding for if for some reason they end up suffering depression as they get older, then they can come to you and say, hey, I think I'm dealing with what Aunt so-and-so is dealing with. Because some days I wake up and I just feel really, 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 really sad for seemingly no reason. And I need help with that. At the same time, kids have a brilliant way with words. So if they have even the slightest understanding of what she's going through and how it's affecting them, then the next time she makes them a promise, you never know. They might look at her and say, that sounds great, but it's okay if you're too sad to do it that day. We can do it another time. Or next time they see her, just be like, it's okay that you didn't get to do it last time because you were too sad, or whatever. So, I wanted to make sure and address that, since you said that was really what was the worst, was the situation with the kids. Again, aside from addressing it with her directly, just setting these boundaries, giving yourself some space. If your main concern is standing up for yourself, for your family, for your values, then you're going to have to kind of start looking for ways that you can do that, and understand that she's going to need to make some adjustments. It's not always pretty. It's not always comfortable for everyone. But if you can sit down and be really honest with yourself about the areas where you feel like she's been stepping over lines for you, and and you can try and work through and release as much emotion about it privately to yourself, then, I don't know, write it down in a letter. I really wish you wouldn't do this, and this part really upset me for these reasons, and whatever else. Not to give to her, but to clarify for yourself. These are the things that really upset me. And then go back to it the next day or a few days later and think about why it upset you. And look at how to avoid it happening again in the future. Because especially with family, we have a tendency to be more open, more willing to let them in to areas of our life that we wouldn't let anybody else into. And people don't necessarily intentionally take advantage of that, but it is something that they can accidentally take advantage of. They can overstep those bounds all the easier, because if you think of it like an electric fence, you've got the electricity turned off for family a lot of times. So it's a lot easier for them to hop it and end up in your own personal sanctuary space than it would be for someone else. So definitely think about having a conversation with her. Think about how you think that would go. Be really honest. Don't assume her feelings. Don't assume how you think she would react, because people constantly surprise me. They constantly surprise my clients. But more than anything, think about just changing your approach with her just slightly. I'm a huge fan of cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm a huge fan of the butterfly effect, of course. Things like that. The slightest change from one person in one area, whether it be how they think about a situation, whether it be how they act in a situation, or how they feel about a situation, can make a huge change, not just in their own life, but it tends to ripple outwards and have an effect in other people's lives. So if you've been feeling really upset that she lies to you, you've been feeling really angry, you've been feeling really sad or depressed yourself about it, look at those feelings. Address why. Address how important it is to you that she be able to rely on you. Or address if it does feel like it's too much. You know, you have your own life, you have your own family. If she's been leaning on you too much, then boundaries are necessary for a whole other reason there. That it's not your responsibility to take care of your sister. She's an adult. She's got her own responsibility for her own life. And you've also got 3 other sisters and parents to help be there for her. She also probably, hopefully, has friends and other support systems set up. But keeping her in a place where she feels good is not only not your responsibility, but I'm assuming something that you're not trained for. And in a position to really do. I don't know what kind of depression she has. I don't know if she's on any medication. I don't know any of those things. But a lot of times we as individuals can get really bogged down and feel a lot of pressure to be there and fully support another family member because we love them, because they're family, and we want to do everything that we can for them. So much so that we can get really clouded about what we actually can do and what's actually being helpful. So the best thing that you can do for you and for your family, your immediate family of your kids and everything, is to take care of your needs. Look into, again, your feelings, address things, and know that as long as you're not attempting to be actively hurtful, if you're not trying to lash out at her, if you're just doing what you need to do for you, yes, she may react poorly. I don't know. There's also a good chance she'll completely understand, because she may have to work really hard. Hopefully she's working really hard at doing what she needs to do for her so that she can feel healthy and she can feel safe and secure in her own daily life as she works through her depression. But neither of you is going to be able to do a whole lot better if you're not taking care of yourselves first and taking care of what you need to do to be in your own best space, to be your own best version of yourself. So, to wrap things up, take care of you. Can't pour from an empty cup, all of that. And don't be afraid to put some boundaries down. Don't be afraid to be honest with her. Again, trying to address those feelings, trying to love her unconditionally. Know that she's not doing it maliciously. She's not trying to hurt you, even when she does hurt you. And so if you can cope and release a lot of those feelings yourself, then you'll be in a better place to make, smoother changes, smoother adjustments with her going forward. Because, for example, a little comment like, I would really appreciate it if you were more honest with me about this, or whatever else, is very different than if you're feeling very emotional and intense and like, don't lie to me about this because I know that I'm just going to hear from so-and-so later that you're telling me something different. Or, I really know that I can't even believe anything that you say anymore. Things like that come across as very accusatory, come across and will create a very combative situation in the relationship and can make her very defensive and just exacerbate the whole problem. One more tip that I had written down earlier to mention too is to look at asking more vague questions when you're having a conversation with her. Sometimes people can have a tendency to, when they've been dealing with a family member or a friend who's been struggling with depression or anxiety or whatever, and they've shared a lot of things and there's a lot of deep things going on in their lives, we can have a tendency to ask a lot of really pointed, really deep questions. Instead of, hey, how's your day going? It's, oh, how are things going with that person at work that you were having trouble with? Or what ended up happening with that thing that was really bothering you the other day? Or how is so-and-so treating you now after this happened? And jump right into the drama, right? And that's natural. It's tempting. We want to know the answers to those questions. But when someone struggles, again, with depression, anxiety, whatever else, or, I don't know, any of us, we can be, and this word's gotten a little intense, socially speaking, but we can be triggered, so to speak, by something being brought up when we're not necessarily ready for it. If she's having a halfway kind of day, where she's barely holding it together, and she just wants to be around you and have a nice day and try and recharge, and then you suddenly bring up that thing that she's been struggling with all week, it could send her into a spiral. It could send her into a thing where she suddenly starts talking about stuff that's not necessarily true, or suddenly starts talking about stuff that she didn't want to be talking about, and it can all go sideways. So there's a funny balance here of trying to give her more say in her end of things, what she feels like sharing, when she feels like sharing, how she feels like sharing, while also allowing yourself that same opportunity. That you don't have to ask about things that you don't want to talk about. If she starts talking about things that you're not really comfortable talking about, you can share with her that, while I appreciate that you're opening up to me about this, I'm not really in a place to help you deal with it right now. And so, in fairness to you, I wanted you to know that, you're welcome to tell me about it, or if you don't want to hear about it, I'd rather that you talk with someone else about it. Is it something that you can talk with your counselor about or your therapist about? Or do you have someone else that you can talk to about these kinds of things? If not, can I help you find someone who's more able to help you address this? Because I love you. You're my sister and I want to be there for you, but I don't really feel like I'm in a position to help you with these kinds of things. If you can cut through all of the drama, if you can cut through all of the intense emotions and stresses and everything else that I imagine have been piling up for quite a while, then you guys can start to have a more clear, clean, it's never going to be completely clean because it's family and it's life and it's relationships, but a more honest relationship which is what it sounds like overall is what you're looking for. You'd like for her to be more honest with you, even if it means that she doesn't share as much, because what's the point in having her share things that aren't true, right? I hope that answers your question. If not, you're welcome to go back and add more to the form for anyone else who would like to supply questions to be answered in the future. You can do so at embraceyourpassion.co. On the podcast page, there is a link to it's a Google form, completely anonymous is the goal there. You don't have to turn in your name or your email address or anything. And you can go ahead and send in your question. And to the lovely concerned sister who sent in today's question, you're welcome to go in there and throw in some follow-up questions or whatnot if you'd like. And I look forward to bringing this segment back, answering more of you guys' questions in the future. Hopefully, you got something from today's discussion. We touched on a ton of different topics. If there was anything in particular that you'd like me to go into in more detail, or anything that really stuck out to you as being really interesting, feel free to either pop it in the comments below on wherever you're listening to this at, pop it into the Facebook group, or send me an email, csullivan@embraceyourpassion.co, and I can go ahead and include it in a future episode. In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderfully excellent rest of your week, and I look forward to talking with you again next week. Bye-bye.